You- How is everybody? This is Yosef Ben-Mir. I am in the outskirts of Marrakesh, where I live, and it's Wednesday, April 15th. We've been homebound. Has it been a month now? Approaching a month? How do you feel about it? How's your health? Do you wake up feeling worried, feeling content? Are you eating well? Are you walking? Are you getting the sun? How you doing? Have you spent a month at home before? Are you happy with whom you are at home with? Let's hope for that, for sure. Our talk today will be about how interfaith actions of, of solidarity based on our multicultural identities, how that is an essential vehicle for sustainable development. How can our diversity, religious, um, cultural, ethnic, how can our diversity be a impetus for achieving projects that benefit our livelihoods, our health, our education? And in fact, not only can it be a benefit, but it's absolutely essential that our multicultural way as Moroccans, even as I'm an American in Morocco. But whatever our society, how can our different backgrounds as members of that society be critical for that society to achieve sustainable development, projects that endure and give benefit into a distant possible future? And so that's the topic. Did I leave the previous topic too soon of what it's like to be homebound day in and day out, and likely that we will be for some weeks ahead? Or we don't quite know. Does anyone want to say anything about that? I'm looking at comments. There's no sun in the UK. Okay, well, that's that can be tough after a while, can't it? And even when we have sun, are we absorbing it and appreciating it and making the taking the best advantage of it? So let's think of our UK sisters and brothers who don't have sun, and we who do, and let that be a reminder that those who may be fortunate to have sun, although we'll take rain, to be honest, won't we? We'll prefer rain these days in Morocco. But if we are fortunate to have sun, let's take the time every day to absorb it. And I'm saying that to me as much as to anyone, perhaps even more. One of the magnificent things about working in Morocco and giving one's professional life and one's heart to Moroccan development. And I'm looking at you, friend in the UK, and I'm going to continue with what you're writing. I'm not allowed outside. Oh boy, I'm sorry. No, not even outside. You can't go outside. That's it's extremely difficult to be outdoors in these times, but better than the alternative right now. That's right. That's right. I guess the rule of thumb is 6 feet apart, but in places we can't even do that. And even when we do, we ought to be having a mask. And are we absolutely sure that it's 6 feet? The New York Times article has on its homepage today examines that, the 6 feet rule. And so look into whether, in fact, 6 feet is what is appropriate to keep us safe. So those who don't have the opportunity to go outside, just know that for us who can, who may have a garden, I'm just feeling for you right now, because that sounds really, really hard to endure week in and week out. And so just take care. And I guess in those situations, we live more and more in the mind, maybe in the recesses of our mind. And so maybe that could be strengthening as time and life unfolds. Just be well. And I'm sorry that you can't go outside. I was saying that in Morocco, we live in a country that champions multiculturalism and champions what I had just said, that intercultural dialogue is to be used for as a pathway, as a bridge for sustainable development. How can we, as Muslims, Christians, and Jewish people, communicate and discuss and directly in a participatory way, and how can that experience actually create projects that benefit people's lives? And that's a Moroccan model. That's a Moroccan approach. And that's a huge gift of a policy which requires fulfilling, and that's a whole nother story. But that's a huge opportunity that's given to the people when we need those kinds of frameworks to achieve projects that make a difference in people's lives. We need those kinds of visionary programs and approaches to achieve sustainability. Let's be multicultural, and let's use it to improve our education. Let's use it to create jobs. Let's use it to improve our roads and improve our water systems, and improve our hygiene and those kinds of human development areas of life. I want to give an example. Myself at the Haouz Foundation, before the foundation began in 2000, I sort of stumbled into this area of this way of operating in Morocco in terms of its multiculturalism and it's the dialogue between its representatives and resulting into projects. In 1993 to 1995, I was a Peace Corps volunteer, and every time I came to Marrakesh, I had to pass by a mausoleum. I didn't know what it was. I just saw what appeared ancient white buildings or structures. And I didn't know, as I passed by them, going to and from the village where I lived, that it housed the burial of a 1,000-year-old Hebrew saint. And I always looked out for that white mausoleum because it looked like nothing else I've seen in Morocco, but also the mountain that's sort of encrusted it was something that I thought, if were terraced, the community could build the tree nursery that the local people were wanting. And so here's a little technical aside. How long does it take for a seed to grow into a sapling? Anyone want to put a remark there? Well, it takes about 2 years. And so if you're a farmer and you're planting barley and corn, as you have done for your family has done for generations or even centuries, you need that harvest this year. And so you can't plant a nursery for 2 years without harvest for 2 years for that seed to grow into a sapling, and then that sapling is then transplanted to your field for cultivation. So we need land in order to build the people's nurseries. And so looking at that mountain surrounding the mausoleum, an empty mountain, it seemed like, well, let's just terrace it, see if we can bring water, and let that be the terraces that upon which the nursery was planted. And that's what happened. We learned that the mountain side was part of the site of the sacred burial of the saint. We had to, and by the way, this whole process is years and years and years. We contacted the Moroccan Jewish community in Casablanca, who signed over that land, and so now the Moroccan government has funded the foundation to build that nursery on those terraces. Now think about this, and I always want to take a pause. A tree nursery for farmers in remote, distant place is being planted on land lent by the Moroccan Jewish community, funded by the Moroccan government. And I think that's remarkable. I think that's incredible. And so okay, bye. Okay. It's really spectacular that Morocco wants to fund that. And there were offers from international sources that saw this as a creative, strategic, human developmental project and said, can we offer funding? The Moroccan government wanted to fund it itself to show that it is Moroccan. So now that's one example. There is a historic monastery called Tumlelin, outside of Azru, that up until I believe the 50s was a functioning monastery. And so now there's land, and we're speaking with its organizers. They want the nursery there. So we already have the commitment for land to build a nursery on what was once a monastery. And the first chance we get after this confining life that we all now lead is to get to Azra and do the assessment. We've been committed for years to restore the Franciscan church in Essaouira, which the Moroccan government is now doing. And our advocacy for that over years was because if it were restored, it would return to civil society in order for them to have a functioning space. So the idea here is, how do we be multicultural? How do we preserve the historic identities of the nation and celebrate them? And in doing that, we achieve development. And so the tree nursery idea I mentioned does that. We're terracing the site of a 1,000-year-old burial of a saint to build a nursery for human development. Tumlelin is a historic monastery that hasn't been in use for 60, 70 years. And so by building the nursery on it, the human development, we are bringing it back to life again. And so to the church, there isn't a worshiping community in Essaouira, but let's restore that church in order for civil society to have a place to meet and plan and gather and strategize, and if they're doing artisanal work, to promote their craft. And so at once we preserve the church and promote the development of the people, and that's Moroccan, and that's the point. How do we celebrate who we are and achieve the projects of the people. And it takes time. So one thing is to have the law. We have the policy backing. Another is to create the partnerships and raise the funding and implement. And that's a whole world of challenge. I always felt that it would be really hard to work in a country where you have to create the laws and then you have to implement and apply them and achieve them. And I don't know, like, for example, it's hard for civil society in countries in the Middle East and North Africa and other parts of the world. And, in Morocco, we don't have to fight that battle. You are, the people are encouraged to create their local village associations. They are encouraged to create cooperatives. Now, there are regulations and there are reporting requirements, as every nation has them. But there is nothing to stop a person or a group from creating the organization to suit their vision and mission and purpose. And so too are there frameworks that enable the fulfillment of those missions, but you have to translate them into reality. And that's years of effort, friends. That's, as you know, I mean, and so much of what human development is persistence and not letting go and giving one's time. Sometimes I'm asked, Yosef, you've given so many years to Morocco. Why don't you work in another country? And the Haouz Foundation does provide training and capacity building in other countries when we're invited. And we now have a project in Jordan with with OES, the Bureau of Oceans, International Environmental and Scientific Research at the U.S. Department of State. We've had training programs, other women's empowerment related in Jordan. I was happy to conduct a water resource management in Cameroon. We've had occasions to be supportive outside of Morocco, but we don't necessarily seek it or cultivate it or we are concentrated on building the best possible model of a scaled revenue generating model that fulfills the agricultural value chain, that builds projects of the people and does it in a way that is self-sustaining in not just organizationally but financially. And we can talk more about what is our financial revenue generating vision to be able to achieve scale. Let me say it like this. There are 600 Hebrew saints buried in Morocco. We have now built nurseries at 2. So Morocco needs 1 billion trees, hundreds of nurseries to go. We're also given land to build nurseries by the Ministry of Youth and Sports at their children's protection centers, working with teenage boys who have been sent to these centers by the courts for 3 to 6 months. And we are dedicated to not just providing trees for their regions, but to these young people and giving them the opportunity, as much as they would want, to learn employable skills related to agriculture. We receive land from the High Commission of Waters and Forests, who have many hundreds of parcels of land, and we are starting to build on the second that we've been granted. The first is in Marrakesh, and the second is in Ourzazate. So now, what is our financial revenue approach in order to build? We have the foundation manages with local people 11 nurseries now. How do we get to the many hundreds so that we can even think about tens of millions of trees a year, right? This year, the Haouz Foundation is planting 1.2 million. And so for us, the idea of monitoring trees for carbon offsets is one avenue, an important one potentially for us, in order for new streams of revenue to be generated. Now, there's a large process of what that would take, but those are the kinds of things that we're considering and taking practical steps toward. So, um, you know, so there are other frameworks in Morocco in addition to the multicultural one. Morocco's trying to decentralize, wants to decentralize. It's in its Article 1 of the Constitution. Morocco's communal charter requires people's participation in development, and that's the entire mission of the Haouz Foundation, to engage people in the planning, implementation, management, evaluation of their projects, whether in agriculture or health or education or empowerment or otherwise. So now we want to work in more and more places, and to fulfill Morocco's frameworks and vision for itself. And part of that is to create the revenue stream to do that. And I've touched a bit on the multicultural one. Because it's for us, it's not just for Morocco, but for the world. We want the world to see Muslim, Jewish, Christian groups working together. We want the world to see that Morocco and its government has committed its public resources and funding to preserve the churches and cemeteries and historical schools and zawiyas and the multicultural sites of the nation. That's a message that's an educational message for Morocco's youth. It's an opportunity for them to re-explore their own national identity, rooted in multiple identities. But it's something that needs to be shared with the world, and we're also committed to that as the Haouz Foundation in terms of writing and publishing and sharing articles in multiple languages to advocate for people's projects that are rooted in multiculturalism, that are rooted in decentralization, that are rooted in people's participation, that are all about women's empowerment and them, dismantling the inner doubts and disbeliefs that we carry, and create a vision that is set upon and achieved. And so Morocco wants all of these things, and we're not fighting its laws. We're trying to fulfill them. And I, for one, and so many others, are grateful to be in a country that provides these frameworks, but that's not the end of the battle by no means. That's really just the start. It's about fulfilling them. And I think the Moroccan people and the government will be the first to say that we need to fulfill them better, that success is in no way guaranteed. It's about the application and realizing this incredible opportunity that has been set before the people and organizations and associations and the public, private, civil sectors, the universities of this nation to achieve the goals of the nation. So without a guaranteed future, we have been given a great opportunity to achieve not only what would be remarkable for the people, but for the continent of Africa, for the Middle East, for the Islamic world, and for all those who may become aware of what Morocco has set for itself, and inshallah, will more and more achieve for its people. So with that, I will look at if there are any comments that anyone would like to say. I hope you and your family are healthy and well. Alhamdulillah, my kids are here with me in Marrakesh, and they're well. They're homeschooling, and that's from Max, who I was thinking of you today, Max, and I'm going to write you an email. And I think of you often, and just know you're in my heart, and I remain proud and grateful for the time we spent together in Marrakesh. You're a remarkable person, volunteer, and I know you've gone to other nations before and after Morocco, and I just I think of you. Say hi to your parents as well. I was very happy to have that opportunity to meet them in Marrakesh. I'll look and see if there are any other. I see Nick Schaefer. What is the experience like in rural Morocco right now? Is there a full lockdown and curfew as well? There is, and um, but people need to irrigate, and people need to take care of their fields, and people need to um, cut grass to feed to you know cows for milk, and people need to take their herds of sheep and goat, and people need to um, plant. It's the planting season, and so one of the things now, but respectful of doing so, but respectful of the situations that the nation and the world finds itself. One of the things that at the everything's on lockdown, and yet people are planting. And as you know, the Haouz Foundation is dedicated to planting. And planting for us is with schools and in groups, but planting is also on an individual basis. A farmer in her or his field, and so or planting in a nursery is an individual experience, can be. And so we haven't had to stop planting, respecting the the what we all need to be safe and healthy, which is to do it on an individual basis. And so it's one of the remarkable things about this, when you see the world economically close down, people still plant, and people still irrigate, and people still weed their fields, and people still do what it takes um, to live in rural Morocco. And that's a good question. Nick Schaefer was also a volunteer and spent time, recently returned from Jordan, and again, someone young and dedicated to people's development. And I wish Max and Nick met, because they are two very sincere, hardworking, selfless, generous, caring people. C. Mohammed says, "Hello, sir. This is Mohammed. Open Hands Initiative. All right." Which is a wonderful group. I hope you still, well, you saw from my reaction that I remember. I have a question. Given the current circumstances of the pandemic, international is limited, if not impossible. That is right. And so I need to scroll down more. All of these measures are in purpose of containing the pandemic. Knowing that global pandemics are an indirect result of globalization, how do you think pandemics would change our vision of multiculturalism? Boy, multiculturalism rests on interaction and participation and celebration and solidarity and unity and coming together in a pandemic environment. And it's such a great question, Mr. Mohammed. And so we need to look, so many times we've heard, and I think so many of us feel in our hearts, that post-pandemic may not look like pre-pandemic. And so we have to be multicultural. We have to be in unity and at once celebrating our diversity and solidarity. And so how can we do that in this pandemic and post-pandemic? Well, let's hope that certainly it'll be a return to gradual. It'll come back gradually. We know from 12 to 18 months there will be a vaccination for this, but maybe that just means in the future there'll be another pandemic. I don't have the answer, but other than to say we must always find a way. And remember, even in places where a shadow of one person cannot overlap with another, where there's such strict class division that we've seen in our world, and that exists today, and where we've seen totalitarianism, where there's utter fear between people and doubt, that we have still seen in these extreme circumstances a an ability, a will uh, to where people still come together. That solidarity can never be completely denied, and we should commit to whatever means safe, the means that are safe, to ensure that it doesn't be inhibited. If sustainability depends on multiculturalism, that we cannot achieve 1 billion trees in Morocco without interfaith, and knowing that, there's a pandemic that could inhibit interfaith actions and multicultural actions and dialogue between groups that may have at once be distant, we have to find means to make that bridge. Is it technological? Is it standing 10 or 12 feet apart in a park? Is it accepting a gradual pace toward unity again? We don't know. And leaders and governors and policymakers who are challenged with this are trying to figure it out right now. But all we can say is to ourselves, let's participate in a safe way, but let's participate. Do you think that in your program, animal issues can be supported, knowing that equines, is that related to horses, mules, and donkeys? Absolutely, and they must be. You know, one of the things that we learned from scriptures, and I say that because when I hear something in the Quran, and I hear that also in the Torah, and I hear it, the same thing in the Bhagavad Gita, and I hear it in the Bible, that's when I really listen. When multiple texts say the same thing, we ought to pay a little more attention, because at least it's interesting. And one of the things that we find is to be gentle on animal life. And so can we have an enduring society, a sustainable society, without being supportive of animal issues? Impossible. It's part of the equation of sustainability. We have to be careful of the emotional state of animals. An animal, if we're to eat a goat, that goat ought not know that it's going to pass away, that it be painless and it be unknown. And if we're going to take eggs from a bird, that bird ought to be to eat, and we understand that we need to eat. We don't want to deny ourselves eggs, but that bird ought to be moved away, because it's emotionally taxing for a bird to witness its eggs being taken. And so, that when we act accordingly in this way, that lends towards the endurance, the survivability of society. And so absolutely, Amal, to your question, that animals need to be part of the equation. And nothing is more, when we see a goat being lifted by its beard in order to move it from one place to another, where sometimes we see that in the souk. And here I am, how many of us have grown beards as a result of this confinement? But it's harrowing, being lifted up by our hair, and we need to educate ourselves in order to not just be, to be considerate with animals to the extent of their emotional well-being as well as their physical. Toby is a dear friend in Freiburg. He's had, well, I don't know, should I be talking about people? But just a remarkable, talk about commitment to sustainability, talking about people of walking the talk, that when we travel, that ought to be offset. And we need to be analytical of ourselves and our institutions so that we are, in fact, sustainable. And Toby is a remarkable leader of his institution, Robert Bosch College, and leading that college in sustainability. And I'm going to read your question. Nice to hear you too. And it was the most beautiful experience I had before the pandemic and the confinement was visiting Toby and his colleagues and students in Freiburg. And it was, I must say, my introduction to the pandemic was actually a warm, beautiful experience because it was really from Freiburg where the confinement began. And so I entered into my own confinement with warmth in my heart because of that experience, Toby. And I'm so grateful to you for it. I'm very sorry that this summer is probably so. Robert Bosch College at Toby's leadership, and of course the headmaster, incredible headmaster there. Lawrence is his first name. Just a great leadership at Robert Bosch College. But it was Toby that introduced us. They are planting 24,000 trees with the High Atlas Foundation, and part of that is to bring students to learn about what we're talking about and to experience it in the field. And so, yeah, we won't be able to do it this summer, Toby, but ways of how we can, institutions can stay in touch. That's great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Toby. I would love for our institutions to stay in touch, to be creative and see how we can engage the students. By the way, the Robert Bosch College, and I believe there are 18 of such colleges, 16 to 18-year-olds. I had the opportunity to visit 4 classes, to give a talk, and they're just remarkable young people. And I came back with brochures and I gave them to my 2 children. And I even mentioned it in the past couple of days, Toby, about how it would be an incredible blessing for my kids, for really just any kids, to have the opportunity to go there. It's a rigorous academic program, and the opportunity to be with young people from 120 different countries. Really, I left with my heart full, and I thank you for that. So I just I'm going to leave it at that. I want to say I enjoyed this. I enjoyed your questions. There's Mohammed wrote one in Arabic, and I'm sorry that I'm not able to just immediately decipher it. If I missed a question, please forgive me. Yeah, I see some more comments, but let's say I see some Oujda. Stay safe, sir. Great to see you. Greetings from Oujda. Anyway, Oujda is also, I see Oujda and I have to go there and read it because Oujda is in my heart. It's a priority region of the High Atlas Foundation. It's the region that borders Algeria. It's a closed border, and so people are suffering because of that economically. It's the number of cases of the pandemic is increasing, and my eyes always go to Oujda because my heart is there, and so just wishing you the best. And so I'm going to sign off now. I feel like I'm talking too much, but just wishing everyone peace at home and well-being and nourishment and health. And solidarity in the face of this unknown long difficulty that we all find ourselves in together. My best wishes to you and everyone around you. Bye.